Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, prepared to check in on a worm bin and give them this really generous feeding. I mean, as far as quantity goes, this is about as much stuff as I would normally come down here with when I was preparing to feed 2 bins, but today I guess we're going to be a little bit more generous than usual. I have been in a pretty overstocked mode now for a while, so it does always feel good to be able to move some stuff out of my freezer and get it into the custody of the worms. So really quick before we get started, I created a little diagram down here, which is intended to simply show how we had created a trench down the middle in this direction to feed last time, which was 10 days ago. And that check-in 10 days ago was feeding number 16. This nice assortment of different stuff that they're getting today is feeding number 17. And something we've been doing in this system now for some time is moving the feedings around. So what we had established in here was a almost like a three separate places to feed. So example, in this direction we would have always been putting some food down the middle, but then also a little bit flanking it along the outer walls. And then during the next check-in we would alternate to these other walls, and we would have 3. Once again, the middle would always get a feeding, and then the other 2 feedings would be here. But last time we did feel that it was pretty easy to excavate and move material around in this bin, because up until just recently it was quite difficult to do that, since this system is built out of rope and twine. So this twine rope, when it first went in here, was combined with a whole bunch of really thin twine too, which kind of made its way all between the larger chunks and everything like that. So the stuff was all tangled together in a big tight, not so tight, you know, but still such that it wasn't easy to just move some material aside because everything would come with it. But we started noticing during recent check-ins how it was becoming quite possible to till down into the system, you know. So we took advantage of that. So instead of just punching little holes into which we would want to place the feedings, we did actually do a regular excavation of a trench all the way across to put the last feeding. So I guess we'll do a quick exploration of how that last feeding's progressing. I do see lots of springtails scattered throughout this material. All those little white specks everywhere are springtails, from what I believe, from what I understand. And I'm also feeling a good bit of moisture. All right, this should be fun, because you know, the last time we fed, they must have gotten more than a half a dozen of these coffee filters, and each coffee filter was packed with apple peels and apple cores. And it looks like at least this coffee filter's still got some composting activity happening inside of it. And I guess what I'm seeing here is some apple peel that still has a little bit of apple attached to it, so that's kind of cool. We got one little party happening over here. And I mean, this is kind of cruel. Do I want to do this? Because there's nothing beneath them that they can dive down into now. They're obstructed from getting out of the bright lights by the coffee filter below them. Maybe I won't do that for each of them, but I thought it might be interesting just to take a quick peek at each of these little worm parties that we created inside of each of these coffee filters loaded with apple peel. So yeah, why don't we just indulge our inner geek for a minute at the expense of the comfort of the poor wormies. And then we could just proceed. But I always am kind of curious to see how the last feeding is progressing. And for example, this pile here inside of this coffee filter, perhaps it was just more generously stocked with stuff, or maybe the worms just couldn't get to it as quickly as they were able to get to other ones. But I do see a lot of leftover in that one over there, for example. And then not only were we super generous with the coffee filters as little burritos or little sandwich wraps for each portion, we threw in a large napkin beneath the feeding too. So from the perspective of bedding, we were quite generous in here last time. And I did review the video before coming down here to feed, just to refresh my memory on how things went in here last time, and I made comments a couple times during the check-in. And you're already seeing signs of why I made the comment and why I'm going to comment on it now. It's basically commenting on how it does feel like we might be approaching a comfortable operating capacity in this system. So I mean, it doesn't mean we're at capacity. It doesn't mean it's going to start overflowing and spilling out the sides if I add another handful of food or bedding. It's more along the lines of me feeling restricted from being able to move things around within the bin the way I like to do during my check-ins because of the fairly large quantity of material in here. So we hinted at it a couple times last check-in, and I think we're just going to follow through on the suggestion I made then, which is to be a little bit more stingy with bedding on this go-around, or possibly just omit bedding at this point. I'm starting to lean more towards omitting it. And I'm really questioning about, I'm really starting to question the quantity of food I came down here with. While I've got all the confidence in the world with these little wormies to be able to tackle a kind of a stretch goal, if it were to become a goal of theirs to consume everything I've given them as quickly as possible, but I don't want to go overboard if I don't have to. In other words, that's my way of saying I'll do it if I have to. But it does feel to me like, based on some of the leftovers I'm seeing in here, maybe I'm just spotting a couple larger objects, such as these pieces of lime, which to me still appeared as whole objects, making me question whether I would want to go ahead with today's feeding. And these are just, by their nature, I think actually this is orange based on its scent. Yeah, maybe we don't have to be so shy with regards to being generous with the feeding. Perhaps we could give them a good amount. Again, it just takes me back to the consideration of space. So I am tempted to cut back, but let me explain what my game plan is for feeding. Since we were always alternating the direction of the trench, if you want to think of it that way anymore. Previously it was just 3 holes in a line, but now that we're actually able to dig a trench this way, it even came up as a comment in the last video about whether or not it would be possible to cut a trench in the opposite direction. I don't see why not. Some of this thicker twine is still kind of holding together quite nicely, and it's going to take some time for that to break down, but all the thinner twine that was intertwined with the big stuff is what I think was holding everything together and preventing me from being able to excavate freely anywhere I wanted to. But I do believe at this point, we've already proved it too. I think we just kind of went excavating around one time a couple check-ins ago, and I think we might have even overturned all the material throughout the entire bin to prove to ourselves that we do have that latitude in managing the bin anymore. But yeah, look at that feeding zone, packed with worms and packed with lots of moisture and leftovers for them to keep working on. And it almost feels like I should not disturb this section in the middle here, because we already messed with it once. But yeah, if we're going to try to cut a trench across in the opposite direction now, which is what one of the viewers recommended that we try, then we might just have to disrupt things over there. I'm just questioning whether or not it's going to be possible, because I'm already encountering some fairly large fragments of twine down here. I try to bring one end of it to one side of the trench, and then I try to push the other end of it to the other side of the trench, and it's not really being so forgiving, but it's still kind of working. So perhaps we can pull it off in sort of a modified fashion, and perhaps on this go around simply excluding the center this time and just having 2 feeding zones on either side of the previous trench. So yeah, maybe we're not quite at the point where we can till up as freely as I thought we could. I was just under the impression that okay. There you go. That's pretty much the prime example of what it is that I'm trying to see not happen. So let's just slow down, be a little bit more careful here. And I just checked that pile of stuff that I ejected off the other side. I don't see worms in it, so I don't think there's anyone that's in danger because of my carelessness. But I believe we should just proceed with trying to get as much of this food in here for them as possible, getting things covered up and end the major disturbance. So I bumped into 2 pumpkin stems along the way. We'll drop those down into the feeding zone. I know there was also here it is. It was the seed from a mango. And I'm always curious with these sort of tough, slow composting objects, whether or not I'm going to be able to mess with it, break it. And that thing is still not giving, so we'll try again next time. But yeah, that is a generous feeding. I think one of the other comments about the last video was anticipating that if we were to come back in here soon enough to walk in on the worms still working on that apple peel feast that we gave them last time, then it would be a fun check-in. And I would have to say that if we were after a really fun check-in, then we definitely succeeded. Mission accomplished. So, you know what? I'm not even going to cover up at this point. I'm just going to hold off on doing the finishing touches of covering up here with the plastic. I mean, we could level off and we can mark where we fed with the feeding zone indicator. But I'm going to have to do a little bit of tidying up here once we stop rolling. Go grab my dustpan and try to pick up that stuff that I ejected out of here and try to clean up the mess. So before I get off to doing those kind of boring housekeeping chores, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, then as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.